Arcanum 8, Blind Justice. Arcanum 8 pictures a woman seated on a throne that rests on a four-tiered dais. She wears a blindfold and a headdress composed of 4 iron laces. In her left hand she holds a pair of balances, and with her right she brandishes a sword. By her side stand a sphinx, a lion, and a winged genie. Above her head rises a winged turtle and a canopy inscribed with a cross. Opposite the canopy shine 8 stars. Symbolism and philosophy. The blindfolded lady in this card is said by some writers to dispense justice impartially, according to the immutable laws of God and nature. Our view varies greatly from that interpretation. We conceive her to represent man's animal soul, ruling from her throne in the temple of weights and measures. The allocation of this card to the earthy sign Capricorn relates her to our system of commerce, which is the great Babylon we have built. Babylon means tyranny and confusion. This system results from the exploitation fostered by merchant princes who buy and sell the bodies and souls of men with the same cold logic they use in purchasing gold and silver and precious stones. The term merchant princess, as used in the 18th chapter of Revelation, means all those who control the economic destiny of mankind, be they government officials, captains of industry, bankers, or labor leaders. Those who suffer from the small justice meted out by the Babylonian commercial and judicial system blame the leaders of that system for their woes. They say that if the rulers didn't show so much greed, selfishness, and lust for power, things would be different. The symbolism and philosophy of Arcanum 8 tell us that unjust rulers rise to positions of influence only because they exercise more ruthless drive than their fellows. But the real secret of their power lies in this: their cunning brains exploit for personal profit the deep-seated selfish drives in the animal soul of all men. Until we awaken to the voice of the divine soul, pictured in Arcanum 6, we all dance to the tune played by the animal soul, shown as the ruling force of Arcanum 8. With the sword of vengeance, we ward off every influence of the Spirit of God standing at our right. The Spirit has its wings of thought outstretched, ready to carry us into the higher realm of love, brotherhood, and true justice, but too often we refuse his help. The coronet of 4 iron laces the blind woman wears symbolizes the fourfold earthly nature determined to rule in its own strength. It tells us that far too much of our thinking power operates on the wavelength of the war god Mars. Business and war march hand in hand over the battlefields of life. Together they lay waste the finer impulses that many a sincere soul often receives from God's Spirit, ever standing by his side, waiting patiently for the invitation to enter and sup. These healing impulses are constantly devoured by the rapacity of the animal soul, symbolized by the lion, king of beasts, as that soul rules in the kingdom of time, symbolized by the Sphinx, both of which stand at her side. The flying turtle above her head portrays the muddy waters of animal emotions, passions, and instincts that pass for what we sometimes mistakenly call thought. In spite of the fact that this station pictures the believer, the gross elements of his beast nature still dominate his subconscious mind. Arcanum 8 tells him he must learn that apparent victory is not complete on the physical plane alone. Smug self-righteousness and outward piety will not suffice. He must use the sword of the Spirit and the rod of power to fight the good fight of faith, now in the emotional more than the physical realm. He learns that mere formal acknowledgement of God with the lips must begin to be matched with overwhelming power in the heart. Arcanum 8 teaches us the great lesson of equilibrium, one of the key words assigned to this card. Here, too, we must depart from the traditional interpretation. Most writers consider the law of cause and effect, action and reaction, ultimately brings about equilibrium in the individual life. Our view is quite different. 022 gives us an important clue. Only 2 cards in the entire deck display a blindfold, 022 and 8. If you have ever tried to stand perfectly still for a few minutes while blindfolded, you know how difficult it is to keep from weaving in a circle. It is even more difficult to try to walk in a straight line. The sense of sight is vital for maintaining balance or equilibrium. 022 pictures man as a stumbling stranger in this far country of earth. His blindness prevents his walking by the light of heaven. He stumbles headlong into the open mouth of the crocodile as he leans on a black staff of materialism. The blindfold in Arcanum 8 carries much the same meaning as in 022, only this time it is not the blindness of selfish desire, but the blindness of self-righteousness that fails to see in itself the evils it only too readily points out in others. It is the blindness of the carnal mind which receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14. Moffat's translation of this text makes it even more positive. The unspiritual man rejects these truths of the Spirit of God. To him they are sheer folly. The otoliths, tiny calcified organs in the inner ear, sometimes called ear stones, govern our sense of equilibrium. If they become seriously damaged, we can no longer maintain our balance. For example, if a man with defective ear labrs is blindfolded and placed in water so as to equalize his body pressure, he becomes completely helpless and has no longer any notion of the position of his body in space. The senses of sight and hearing, therefore, vitally affect his ability to balance properly. In his original home with his Father in the realm of light, the spirit of man enjoyed equilibrium. On earth, his sevenfold being is overbalanced. 3 parts divine, striving in fertile self-will to rule 4 parts human. This iron-willed dictatorship destroys the harmony of nature. But every violation of natural law strikes back at the violator with double fury. The inevitable result is that Mother Nature, like all women, has the last word. Man deliberately blindfolds his eyes to eternal realities. Consequently, Arcanum 8 pictures him as stark blind and stone deaf to the light of the Spirit and the voice of God, symbolized by the genie standing at his side. The real meaning, then, of the keyword equilibrium, as we understand it, is simply this. The Spirit of God must be joined to our sevenfold nature to correct our basic 3-4 imbalance. This brings the teeter-totter of our life to the horizontal, giving us a 4-4 relationship, thereby equalizing our off-centered condition. It restores our center of gravity. It reconciles us with the law of nature and the law of God. It substitutes the law of love for the law of self. When we conscientiously and persistently seek the aid of the Spirit in our daily life, we can then emerge from under the canopy of materialism, symbolized by the cross in its center, and see the realm of light depicted by the 8 stars. Astrology. Arcanum 8 corresponds to the sign Capricorn, ruled by the planet Saturn, indicating business, profession, honor. Human anatomy. Arcanum 8 indicates the process of bone formation. It has some influence over the parathyroid glands, the frontal pituitary, the otoliths. Due to the influence of Saturn, it is associated with liver function and with the power commonly known as second wind. Its specific influence is over the knee joint and the patella, also the patellar ligament. Masonic ritual. Arcanum 8 corresponds to the Royal Master degree. This degree says that at the building of the temple, King Solomon, Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff, the widow's son, decided to award the most skillful master masons by imparting to them the omnific word. But they took a solemn oath not to impart the word until the completion of the temple, and then only when all three were present. The omnific word represents the consciousness of God. It can be imparted only when the candidate's threefold spirit is awake and ready to receive it. Added to his sevenfold nature, it makes the eighth factor and completes the personal needed to build the mystic temple of truth. It balances his human and divine being and restores his spiritual equilibrium. The Bible. The character of Jezebel best typifies the animal soul Mother Nature gives us at birth. Pictured as the ruling factor of Arcanum 8, Jezebel attempted to kill Elijah in retaliation for Elijah's killing the prophets of Baal and the Grooves. The story allegorizes the basic animosity man creates when he tries to dictate to the life of earth. He reaps false justice when he ignores the ancient law. To rule nature, you must obey her. Revelations chapter 2, verse 20 describes Jezebel as a prophetess who seduces those who try to follow the Spirit, encouraging them to commit fornication and to follow idol worship. Jezebel tempts us only because we want to be tempted. We fall into her arms because we want to forget our responsibility to God, to sacrifice God for self. This is the reason why the quoted statement, "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches," is repeated 7 times in Revelations 2 and 3. In view of the significance of the otoliths, this statement takes on added meaning. It denotes the stone-deaf condition of our spiritual ear before the rebirth, and tells us that our 7 churches must open our inner ear to hear what the Spirit has to say to us. The words of Jesus, as recorded in Matthew chapter 13, verses 13 through 15, give emphasis to the message of Arcanum 8. Therefore speak I to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, By hearing ye shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see, and shall not perceive. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. This applies to all men, not only to the people who lived in the time of Jesus. Our sin-darkened nature makes us all deliberately close our eyes, harden our hearts, make our ears dull of hearing, and wards off the healing influence of the Spirit, ever standing at our side, waiting to help us, until we turn the sword of self-will into the cross of self-sacrifice. That help will never come. Revelations chapter 6, verses 5 and 6 indirectly mentions Arcanum 8 in the type of man who sits on a black horse with a pair of balances in his hand, weighing wheat and barley, symbols of commerce. The 6th chapter of Micah in the Old Testament conveys the same thought. Are there yet the treasures of wickedness in the house of the wicked, and the scant measure that is abominable? Shall I count them pure with the wicked balances, and with the bag of deceitful weights? We feel the customary interpretation that the scales in Arcanum 8 represent God's justice misses the mark, because it is the animal soul, not God, that holds them. That soul is crafty, cunning, deceitful, and vengeful. It is completely self-centered. It loves the scant measure of buying cheap and selling dear, of reaping where it has not sown. Its so-called justice is too often vengeance. But the final blame always rests on the human spirit, not the animal soul. for it consciously blinds itself to and ignores the light of heaven, which requires it to live according to the law of love. When the blindfold is finally removed, we can see with our inner spiritual eye the wisdom contained in the essential message of Arcanum 8, which lies in the words, "He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Aphorism. Remember then, son of earth, that to restore your mental balance and spiritual equilibrium, you must always cooperate with God's Spirit. But you yourself must make the choice. Keywords and correspondences. Arcanum 8. Reference page 94 in the Royal Road.